Hello, we are reading The Eagle by Rosemary Sutcliff. Forgive my appearance, we just got back from a trip. And here we are. We're on chapter 19. If you remember, Marcus and Eska are in a tower. They are being actively chased by tribesmen who are trying to kill them and take back their eagle. So here we are. Traduai's Gift, chapter 19. As they dropped from their ponies in the courtyard below, Marcus and Eska drew back from the parapet. So they're watching the guys down below jump off their ponies, and they draw back from the edge. "Only 3 so far," Marcus whispered. "Don't use your knife unless you have to. They may be of more use to us living than dead. Remember this." Eska nodded and returned his hunting knife to his belt. Life and the urgency of doing had taken hold of them again. Excuse me. Flattened against the wall on either side of the stairhead, they waited, listening to their pursuers questing through storehouse and guardroom. "Fools," Marcus breathed as a shout told them that the stairway had been spotted. And then came a rush of feet that checked at the floor below, and then came on, storming upward. Marcus was a good boxer, and much practice with the cestus last winter had made Eska something of a boxer also. Together, weary though they were, they made a dangerous team. The first 2 tribesmen to come ducking out through the low doorway went down without a sound, like pulled oxen, so they knocked him out. The third, not so completely caught unawares, put up more of a fight. Eska flung himself upon him, and they crashed down several steps together in a flailing mass of arms and legs. There was a short, desperate struggle before Eska came uppermost, and staggering clear, heaved an unconscious man over the door sill. Remember, there were 3. "Young fools," he said, stooping for a fallen spear. "A hound puppy would have known better than that." 2 of the tribesmen, they were all very young, lay completely stunned where they had fallen, but one was already stirring, and Marcus bent over him. "It is Liathan." Remember, Liathan is the chieftain's brother. He said, "I'll see to him. Do you tie up and gag the other 2. The young warrior groaned and opened his eyes to find Marcus kneeling over him with his own dagger to his throat, while close by, Eska was hastily trussing and gagging the 2 unconscious men with strips torn from the cloak of one of them. "That was a mistake," Marcus said. "You should have kept with the rest of the hunt, not come thrusting in here on your own." Liathan lay looking up at him. His black eyes were hard with hate. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. "Maybe we saw the raven, and we sought to be first speared, lest a lowland tribe claim the eagle god for its own," he said between shut teeth. Because he was saying, okay, so maybe we wanted to be first spear, remember that idea? Lest, someone else come and steal the god and have it for their own tribe, because there's a bunch of tribes looking for it. "I see. It was a brave thing to do, but extremely stupid." "Maybe, but though we fail, there will be others here soon." There was a gleam of savage triumph in the black eyes. "So," Marcus nodded, "when they come, these others, you will tell them that we are not here, that we must, after all, have slipped by in the mist, and you will send them back the way they came, over the main ridge yonder, toward the sunrise. So when other people come, you're going to tell them that we aren't here." Sorry. Liathan smiled. "Why will I do these things?" He glanced for a contemptuous instant at the dagger in Marcus's hand. "Because of that?" "No," said Marcus, "because when the first of your friends sets foot on the stair, I shall send the eagle, here it is, into the tarn which lies below this place. Basically, I'm sending it into the rushing river, and it will, well, I don't actually know if it's a river or not. I don't know what tarn is. Tell me in the comments. I'm going to send it splattering down. It will crash into 1,000 little pieces, and it will be gone forever. If one of your men comes up this stairwell. And let's see. We are still a long way from the wall, and you will have other chances, you or others, of the hunt before we reach it. But if we die here, you will lose whatever chance you have of retaking the Red Crest's god, the Romans' god, the eagle." For a long moment, Liathan staring up into Marcus's face. And in that instant, In that silent moment, there grew a light smother of hoofbeats and a distant burst of shouting. Eska rose quickly and crossed, half crouching, to the broken parapet. "The hunt is up," he said softly. Eska, they've done with the first cover. Aye, like a wolf pack, they close in." Marcus withdrew the dagger, but his eyes never left the young tribesman's face. "Choose," he said very quietly. He got up and moved backward to the far parapet, unwrapping the eagle as he did so. So he's out of sight from the people below, but he's right up back where he could drop the eagle. Liathan had risen also and stood, swaying a little on his feet, looking from Marcus to Eska and back again. Marcus saw him swallow, saw him lick the cut from his lip. He heard the sounds of the enclosing hunt, very near now, the men giving tongue like excited hounds. Aye! And from the emptiness at his back, only the plaintive cry of a marsh bird in the wind-haunted silence. He let the last violet fold fall from the eagle and held it up. The evening light, spreading as the mist thinned, struck on the savage gilded head. So it's reflecting the evening light. Liathan made a queer gesture of defeat. He knows he's been beat. He turned and strode rather shakily to the broken parapet and leaned over. The first of the hunt was almost at the gateway, and a shout from under the walls greeted his appearance. So he turns around and he leans over. Liathan called down to them, "They are not here, after all. They must have slipped through the other way in this accursed mist." He pointed wildly, and his voice broke like the crying of a storm. "Try the woods yonder. They will likely have bolted that way." A confusion of fierce voices answered him, and a pony whinnied shrilly. He drew back from the parapet as though coming hot-foot to follow his words, and as the hunt flung back on itself, turned once more to Marcus. "It was done well, was it not?" Marcus nodded without speaking. Through one of the embrasures he was watching the hunt streaming back along the spur and into the firs cover of the main ridge. Men on ponies and men on foot, calling to each other, gathering others as they went, dissolving into the last shreds of the mist. He brought his gaze back to the young tribesman. "Truly it was well done," he said, "but keep the head down, lest any straggler should look back and think it strange to see you still here." Liathan lowered his head obediently and sprang like a wild cat. But Marcus, warned by some flicker in his eyes of an instant before, flung himself sideways, half falling, with the eagle under him, and as he did so, Eska was upon the Highlander and brought him crashing down. "You fool," Marcus said a moment later, staggering to his feet and looking down at Liathan, who lay squirming under Eska's knees. "You young fool, there are two of us and only one of you." He crossed to the two bound men, and after satisfying himself that all was well with them, tore off some strips from the cloak that lay beside one of them, and returned to Eska. Between them they bound the hands and feet of the young warrior Liathan, who had ceased to struggle and lay rigid with his face turned from them. "We can leave the gag for a moment," Marcus said when it was done. He picked up the eagle and began to fold it close once more. "Eska, do you go and make sure the ponies are safe. We shall need them." When Eska was gone, he got up stiffly and turned to the southern parapet. The upland tarn lay clear and dark now beneath the steep fall of the spur. This book is hard because she uses words like tarn and spur, and even I'm not familiar with these terms, so I know it's challenging, and I wish I was able to. I try to look at least some of them before reading it, but I don't really know what that means. I'm sorry. Put it in the comments. The hills were blown almost clear of the mist, though it still scarfed the glen with white, and the evening was coming swiftly. And somewhere southward beyond those hills, not far now, surely, was the wall. I wonder if they make it to the wall and make it to safety. "Why did you come among us, calling yourself a healer of sore eyes, to steal from us the winged god?" Liathan's asking Marcus, Why did you do this?" Marcus swung round in answer to the furious voice behind him. "In the first place, am I so lacking as a healer of sore eyes? At least your brother's son will not be blind." He leaned one shoulder wearily against the parapet and stood gazing down reflectively at his captive. "In the second, I came to take back, not to steal, for it was never yours. Take back the winged god, because it was the eagle of my father's legion. Instinctively, he knew that with Leviathan, as with Katya, that was the part that would make sense. He knew also that it was better for the peace of the frontier that the thing be kept a private feud between himself and the tribes. There was a queer little flicker in Leviathan's dark eyes. So my grandfather was right, he said. Was he? Tell me about this rightness of his. When the priest kind found the winged god was gone, Leviathan said with a kind of defiant willingness to talk, my grandfather swore it was you who had taken it. He said you had the face of that chieftain of the red crests he had seen killed under the wings of the god. He was right. It was his dad that he had seen. I remember he commented. He was like, yeah, they kind of look like you. He was like, no, they can be Greek too. Because he was pretending to be Greek, not Roman. And when we had followed you and searched your gear and found nothing, we said among ourselves that the grandfather grew old and fanciful. It's just some stories. It's not true. Then Galt the fisherman found your ring brooch. We knew that was the case, right? By the shore of the loch, and the bank pulled down in a hollow place under the waterline. So they had stored the eagle, and when Eska came back, he had dropped the brooch that left evidence that it was in fact them. And the bank pulled down, which gave them more evidence that, maybe this is where they kept the eagle. And later we heard a strange tale from the village, where your sword brother was taken sick, and we knew. And my grandfather said I was right, after all, who am never wrong. And he sent for me, for my brother had been savaged by a seal and was too sick of the wound to go to the hosting. He sent for me and said, it may be that it is you who will hunt him down, for there is a link of fate between his line and ours. Interesting. If it be so, kill him if you can, for he has put shame on the gods of our tribe. But also, give him his father's ring. Remember, he had his father's, signet ring. For he is his father's son and more than blood. There was an instant's complete silence. And then Marcus said, you have it now? On a thong or a necklace, right? Like a twine or leather necklace. On a thong around my neck, Leviathan said solemnly. You must take it for yourself, since my hands are bound. He didn't like that. His hands are bound. Marcus lowered himself onto his sound knee and slipped a hand warily under the shoulder folds of the other's cloak, but it was no trick. He found the ring, which had worked round to the back, and drawing it out, cut the thong and slipped it on his bare signet finger. The light was beginning to fade, it was getting dark, and the great stone that had been full of green fire when he saw it last was coolly dark as ilex leaves. Very figurative language, right? Last time when it was full of fire, it was just reflecting the sunlight. Now was as cool as leaves, lit only by a faint surface reflection of the sky. If the fortunes of war had gone otherwise, and Eska and I had fallen to your spears, you would have had small chance to give me my father's ring. How then would you have carried out your grandfather's bidding? He asked curiously. You should have had the ring to take with you, as a man takes his weapons and his favorite hound. So the idea of taking things to the afterlife, like the Egyptians buried, the kings in the tombs, the pyramids. Similarly, lots of people have this idea of burying people or letting people go with the things that were most important to them to the afterlife. I see, said Marcus. From the ring, he looked back to Leviathan, suddenly half smiling. When you go back to your own place, say to Traduai that I thank him for the gift of my father's ring. Eska's step sounded on the stairs, and a moment later he ducked out into the evening light. All is well with the ponies, he said. Also, I have looked round a little and seen that our way lies down the glen westward. That way there is birch cover almost from the first. Moreover, the hunt went toward the sunrise. Marcus glanced up at the sky. The light will be gone in the half of an hour, but much can happen in that time, and it is my heart that we will go now. Eska nodded, reaching him a steadying hand as he rose, and in doing so saw the flawed emerald and gave him a quick, questioning glance. Yes, said Marcus, Leviathan has brought me my father's ring as a gift from his grandfather. He turned to look down at the tribesmen. We shall take 2 of your ponies, Leviathan, to carry us to the wall, but we will turn them loose when we have done with them, and with good fortune you will find them again later. I hope you do, because you brought me my father's ring. See to the gag, Eska. Eska saw to it. So wasn't he gagged Leviathan? So he couldn't call out, hey, there we go. Meeting the furious eyes above the gag, he was angry. Marcus said, I am sorry, but we can ill afford to have you shouting the moment we are gone, lest there be someone within hearing. It will assuredly not be long before your sword brethren return and find you. But to make all safe, I will see that word of your whereabouts reaches the tribesmen when we have reached the wall. That's the best I can do. He said, I'm sure they'll come back and find you, but just in case, in 2 days' time, we'll make sure that you guys hear about where you are, just in case, because we don't want you to actually starve and die of thirst up here. They crossed to the stairhead. Eska paused to collect the tribesmen's weapons from the place where he had stacked them and sent them, all save one spear which he kept to replace his own, over the parapet into the tarn below to crash and die. So they can't, have them to chase after them or free themselves. Marcus heard them take the water in a stutter of faint splashes. Oh, the water, Amelia. While he bent over the other 2 captives, both conscious and hating, fought hard by this time to make sure that they had not yet contrived to slacken their bonds. Then they ducked through the doorway into the descending darkness. The strain of their escape had taxed Marcus to the uttermost, and the respite of the signal tower, short as it had been long enough to let the old wound begin to stiffen. He had to nerve himself to every step, and there seemed a great many more steps on the way down than there had been on the way up. But they reached the bottom at last and came out into the little courtyard. I don't know if you've ever tried to walk downstairs when your legs are injured in some way, but it can be actually a lot harder on your joints than walking up, especially if you're in pain. Where three ponies stood with their reins over their heads. They chose the 2 of them, a black and a dun. So I looked up a dun. It is a beautiful type of horse. It's not quite like an albino, but they call them dun horses, and they have dark hair, but a very light tan, everything else. I don't know why they're called dun, but that's what they are. So a black horse and a dun, who seemed the freshest, and hitching the reins of the 3rd one over a fallen timber to prevent him from following, led them out through the narrow gateway. The last lap, Marcus said, drawing a hand caressingly down the neck of the black pony. We will break fast. We'll have breakfast. Doesn't get fast. You don't eat overnight. We'll break fast in one of the wall stations tomorrow morning. Eska helped him mount before he himself swung onto the back of the dun. For a few moments, Marcus had all he could do to master his mount. It was really hard for him to get control of his horse, for the fiery little brute objected strongly to an unfamiliar rider, snorting and plunging like an unbroken colt, until seeming suddenly to tire the fight, it answered to his hand and set off at a canter, shaking its head and spilling foam over its chest and knees. Eska reined alongside on the dun, and they swung over the steep scarp of the spur and headed downhill for the woods below. Praise be to Lou, they are yet fairly fresh, and we've a hard ride before us. Yes, said Marcus rather grimly, and shut his teeth on the word. That plunging tussle with his mount had taken most of the endurance that was left in him. So he's been exhausted after all these days. He has like an intense battle with his horse to try to make it do what it wants to, because he's not used to him. And he's like, yeah, just one long ride left. But I don't have much any energy or anything left. The light was going fast as it swung into the long southward curve of the glen. The wind was surging through the birch and hazel of the woods, and overhead the sky between the hurrying clouds was kindling yellow as a lantern. That's pretty. Picture. A long while later, a sentry on the northern ramparts of Borkovicus thought that in a lull of the tearing wind he heard the beat of horses' hooves somewhere far below him. Okay, so we have a little pause, a little break. We've changed the main character's perspective, or the first-person perspective. Not first person, sorry, this is third person, but we've changed the narrator. and we are a sentry on the northern ramparts of the wall that they're trying to get to, and he thinks he hears the beat of horses' hooves. He checked his pacing to look far down where the burn cut through its wild glen 100 feet below the fortress walls, but a racing silver-fringed cloud came across the moon, and the glen was a black nothingness below him, and the wind stooped back, blowing away all sound. Curse the wind. There was always a wind, save where there was mist. The wall. Nothing to hear all day and all night. The wind and the peewits calling was enough to make a man hear worse than horses' hooves inside his head. The sentry spat disgustedly down into the dark abyss and continued his measuring pacing. Sorry. Some while later still, the guard on duty at the north gate was surprised by a most imperious beating on the timbers and shout of, "Open in Caesar's name!" So might a bearer of dispatches announce his arrival, if it were any other gate, but the few who came from the north, horse dealers, hunters, and the like, did not hammer on the gate as though they were the legate himself demanding entrance in the name of the emperor. It might be a trick of some sort. Leaving his gate guard turned out and standing ready, the optio is like the second in command of a cohort, clanked up the lookout above the gateway. The moon rode clear of the clouds now, and faintly, so now the moon is shining bright without cloud coverage, and faintly by its reflected light, the optio could pick out two figures directly below him in the shadow of the arch. The sheer drop of the hillside was in shadow, but there was enough light to show it empty of men clear down to the white streak of the burn. Not a trick, then. Who demands entrance in Caesar's name? One of the figures looked up, his face a pale blur in the darkness. Two who have urgent business with the commander and would fain keep their whole skins if possible, and would like to stay alive if possible. We have urgent business. So basically saying, look, this is urgent, like, we're in danger, we would like to not die. Open up, friend. The optio hesitated an instant, then turned and clattered down the few steps. Open up, he ordered. Men sprang to obey him. The heavy oaken valve swung smoothly outward on its stone socket, and in the opening, clearly lit now by the yellow light from the guardroom doorway, appeared two wild, bearded figures who might have been born of the autumn gale. They were so wild, it might as well be wild, wilderness itself. One of them was leaning heavily on the shoulder of the other, that'd be Marcus, who seemed to be supporting him by an arm around his waist. As they stumbled forward, the optio, who began curtly, "Now what?" went kindly enough to steady him on the other side, saying, "Run into trouble, eh?" So he's first about to get onto them, and then he goes, "Oh gosh, y'all are in trouble." But the other laughed suddenly, his teeth showing white in the dark tangle of his beard, and staggering clear of his friend's supporting arm, propped himself against the guard-room wall, and drooped there, breathing hard and fast through widened nostrils. Clad in filthy rags, gaunt as famine and well-nigh as dirty, scratched and blood-smeared as though from contact with many furze bushes, which he had been, he was as villainous an object as the optio had seen for a long time. So they're dirty, clad in gross clothes. They look, they've got scratches and blood and, stuff attached to them. They're starving, just absolutely filthy. He looks as villainous as anything I've ever seen. It's crazy. As the gate clanged shut behind him, this apparition said in the cool, clipped accents of a cohort centurion, "Optio, I wish to see the commanding officer immediately." So the optio and blinked. Presently, after a queer confusion of changing faces, of brusque soldiers' voices, and clanging footsteps along wavering alleyways, between buildings whose corners never seemed to be quite where they expected them, Marcus found himself on the threshold of a lamp-lit room. It flowered suddenly golden on his sight out of the windy dark. A small room, white-walled and almost filled by a battered writing table and records chest. He blinked at it with a queer, dream-like sense of unreality. A strange-built man in half-uniform rose from the camp chair and turned inquiringly to the door. "Yes, what?" He began much as the Optio had done. As the door closed behind him, Marcus looked at the stocky, familiar figure and the square face with the dark hairs growing out of the nose and felt no surprise. He had come back to a familiar world, and it seemed only natural that he should find old friends in it. "Good evening to you, Drusillus," he said. "My congratulations on your promotion." So if you don't remember, I didn't at first. Drusillus was Marcus's second in command when he was in charge of his whole cohort. So it makes sense that they would put him up to first in command of a cohort himself, since he did such a good job at that first experience. The centurion's face was puzzled. His head went up a little stiffly. "Do you not know me, Drusillus?" Marcus said, almost pleadingly. "I am," but light had already dawned in his old centurion, and the bewilderment in his square brown face became blank astonishment, and then lit into incredulous delight. "Centurion Aquila," he said. "Yes, sir, I know you. I would know you in Tartarus itself, now that I come to look at you." He came tramping round the table. "But what in the name of thunder brings you here?" Marcus set his bundle carefully on the table. "We have brought back the Hispania's lost eagle," he said rather muzzily, and very quietly crumpled forward on top of it. And he passed out. Makes sense. And that is all. That was chapter 19. See you all later.